Roman. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Nice to meet you.
Yes, same here. Same here. Happy Hump Day.
Okay, well, what kind of day is it?
Wednesday, the middle of the week.
Hump day. Okay.
Yeah, Hump Day. It's getting over the hump towards Friday.
That's true. That's true.
So where are you located, Roman?
Toronto.
Oh, Toronto, Canada. Yeah, that's awesome. Our friends to the north.
Yeah, we're actually pretty close to each other, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm in Chicago, so yeah, it's not too far. So first of all, thank you for being on the show. I really was fascinated by what you're doing, and it's apropos to even my own personal life. So I was excited to have you on so we could talk about some of this stuff. And I just finished watching your YouTube videos, the one about how to solve conflicts, which I thought was really interesting. And the one thing about that was I found fascinating was where you talked about instead of people blaming others, but instead look at what you're doing and how to resolve that, how you can resolve that conflict, which I am going to use that because I so often do the opposite. I blame my partner and say, well, you're not doing this or you're not doing that. So I read that, I saw that, and then I saw the other one that is also apropos to my life, and that is how to overcome stress. So let's start by just learning a little bit more about you. Tell our audience who you are, what you do, why you do it, all that. Give a little background of that so that people can know who you are, and then we can get right into it.
Sure. I am a life coach working from Toronto, Canada, and I specialize in relationships. So people come to me with things like mostly infidelity, wanting to find the love of their life, or wanting to fix their marriage, or maybe going through a very rough patch like a divorce. And I became a coach because a few things actually came together. One thing was the fact that I went through a painful divorce 6 years ago, and I did not have a coach or a counselor back then. And if I had one, things could have been different for me. And I realized that people like coaches are just really not visible to many people. They don't realize that they have this opportunity to use a coach to improve their life, to improve their relationship.
Sure.
Yeah. That was one thing.
Okay.
The other thing was that I, at that point, I was 32, 6 years ago. I was very bad with women. I did not know anything about women, basically, even though I had spent 11 years with my wife. Yeah. So I put myself out there. I went into the dating world, and
I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, it was difficult. But my point is that by doing that, I learned quite a lot. I had to test everything on myself. And I thought that I could apply that knowledge to help people struggling with the same things.
Sure. My very good friend here in Chicago, she has her own podcast called Menage a Pod, and she is 38 years old, recently divorced, and is now dating as an adult. It's one thing to date when you're in your 20s. It's another thing to date when you're in your mid 30s. And some of the things that she shares with us about dating, and I was like, what? People send you that? People say that? I've learned all sorts of terms, catfishing, right. I don't know, all sorts of different things that people do in dating. And I think it's, once, that would be a whole other show to talk about online dating. When I'm older, so when I was dating, it was like, oh, we meet, you go somewhere for coffee or you go somewhere for food or ice cream or whatever, and you actually talk to each other and get to know each other. But in today's world, you can order partners like you order pizza. Right. You go on an app, Bumble. She uses Bumble a lot, I guess. And so they swipe and they do all these different things, I guess. And but you can put in all these parameters of what you want, what you're looking for, and so forth. So it's really really different than what I've experienced. And just from what she's told me, the reason why I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," when you said you were dating, and I connected that you would start dating in your mid to late 30s. I just start to remember what she was said, and I thought, wow, I'm sorry you have to go through that. I don't know how it is on the other side, but for her, dating men, it's pretty. The chivalry is dead. I can tell you that, pretty much. So Roman, how did you get into this line of work? What did you do before this, and if you did do something before this, what was the catalyst for you now going into this line of work?
Well, before that, I was a translator.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a small translation business, a translation agency back in Russia. And the catalyst for becoming a coach was my move last year from Russia to Toronto, Canada.
Mm. And you moved as a result of your divorce, or was it a planned move?
It was a planned move. Actually, it's been my lifelong dream to move to North America. And finally, I had this beautiful opportunity.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And that's great. So let me ask you this. How is what you're doing different from therapy? So what is the difference between a life coach and a therapist, right? It seems like that. I'd like to know what that is.
Yeah, the very fundamental difference is that coaching deals with basically functional people,
mm-hmm.
whereas therapy helps people deal with mostly psychological problems. So let's say, for example, someone has a bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
They are the client for a therapist, not for a coach.
So I was reading something that I don't know if this is, and this probably lines up with what you just said, but that therapy was for people trying to determine the root cause of how they got to be where they are, whereas coaching was more of, okay, they deal in your present state and they try and coach you to be successful now, not so much go back and resolve the roots of whatever issues you might have. Would that be kind of a fair assessment, you think?
Absolutely. I would say that's like, just to give you an example, therapy goes back into the past, whereas coaching is about the present moment and the future.
Sure. That's what I agree with that.
Yeah.
So what is, like, when someone comes to you, what is a typical first session look like? Like, what do you talk about? How do you get them to talk about what they're doing, and what does that look like?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, the first session with me is always, it's free, because I use this session to understand the person
mm-hmm.
and to see how I can help them. So, for example, today I talked with a girl who is 24. She's from Russia, and she's like, the basic question that I normally ask is, what's happening in your life? Why are you not happy with the situation in your life right now? And from there, I open them up with more and more questions, and like understand their situation from 360 degrees. And for example, with this girl, what I noticed is that she needed more balance between work and life. She was...
Don't we all?
Yes. She is... she falls victim to overthinking a lot. She has trouble trusting people. And yeah, she wants to find a great partner for herself. And also just like a great girlfriend in general. So these are the results that I promise to help her with.
And how do you guide someone from a position like that? How do you guide them to? The reason why I ask is, as I was researching about you and what life coaching was about, one of the things that I saw that I thought was interesting is when someone is closed off, then then they basically are closed off from receiving any of that positivity or that, I don't know what to call it, but to receive anything from any other people because they're like closed off within themselves. How do you address that? How do you sort of help them take the first step? Because the first step is the hardest step from what I've read, especially in finding a relationship. And I will tell you that with my own friend, the thing that she overcomes is every time it doesn't work out, she always immediately blames herself. That's the first thing she does is it must be me. Something's wrong with me. So if somebody has that already, how do you address that? How do you help them overcome that so that they can receive a person in the proper way? And can you?
Okay, so the question is about blaming yourself.
Yeah. So the question is when somebody comes to you and every time, let's say they've had relationships in the past, and every time those relationships fail, they always blame themselves. Like they always say, well, it must be me. It's not them or circumstances or just life. It must be me. And that seems to be a common thread in the dating scene, right? And I just wonder how it made me start to think, like, if you have a new client that comes to you and they are dealing with that, how do you take that first step to get them to sort of clear that out so that they can move on and potentially have a healthy new relationship?
In general, I don't. I think that's a very healthy approach because they are proactive. In fact, in my practice, I see the opposite. Most people believe that the problem was not with them, but with the other person. And they come to me to change the partner, or they come with like emotional baggage from their relationship. And they say that I did everything right, but the other person did it wrong. So in fact, I have to do the opposite. I ask them, okay, let's look at the lessons that you can, gather from that experience so that you do not make the same mistake. So I have to actually sell them on being more proactive and being more responsible for what they did. But in this case, in this example that you provided, when someone is blaming themselves, I would basically say this. First of all, let's look at the lesson again. What's the lesson? And for example, the lesson I was not communicating very well. Okay, so what are the steps that you can take in the future to be a better communicator? So, and those are steps 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's find a person to practice on. And then, like, she goes to meet that person, she dates them, she practices those 3 tips, and she comes back to me with feedback and for feedback. So by doing this, she focuses on the lesson, and then she focuses on practicing the results.
Sure, that makes sense. And especially after watching that YouTube video, I wrote down, comfort, variety, love, significance are the 4 basic ones. And then the higher level ones were growth and contribution. And I think that can be applied across the board for almost every relationship, right? So do you coach individuals or couples, or do you coach both? And which do you prefer?
Well, I coach both. Most of my clients are individuals because it's not easy to get a couple for counseling. For example, I have a couple right now. Not a couple, but an individual. And I keep asking him to let me speak to his wife because they're very close to getting a divorce, very, very close. And I would like to prevent that. And it's difficult for me to just work with just the husband. So I would really prefer to work with the wife as well. But so far, no luck.
No luck. Oh, that's sad. That's sad. But I think it's interesting that he sees the value in chatting with you, but the wife doesn't.
It's not like that. He did not offer her to sit down with me because he's not sure about that.
Does he really want to get divorced? I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one. Well, let's go on. That is a perfect segue into my next question is, are there any relationships that you've sort of gotten involved with that are already too far gone? Do you ever say, listen, there's nothing I can do to save this relationship? And I don't know how you could answer that really, other than, do you have a distinction where you say these two people don't want to work this out, or this person doesn't want to work anything out, so there's nothing that I can do to help save your relationship?
That's a great question, because it's not exactly how it works with me, or at least with my coaching. I don't diagnose.
Sure. So you just help.
I help the person do what they want.
That's interesting. And then do you just focus on interpersonal relationships, or do you focus on business or workplace relationships as well?
Yeah, I help with those relationships as well, because normally a client might come with me with a relationship problem, but as we sit down and we get and we talk, and maybe a few sessions down the road, we find out that he could also use my help with business relationships. That's true. Like, for example, I have a client. She's a woman from Toronto, and she originally came with me for help with her divorce, for like emotional support. But then I'm also helping her with business relationships, because she realized that by developing her business, she would feel so much better, and it would, take up a lot of her time every day. And she wanted to make herself busy and not to think about, the pain of the divorce.
Sure. I can see that. As I was researching for the show, one of the things that came up was the use of a technique called dopamine fasting.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it seems to be gaining some traction. Can you explain what that looks like, and how someone can include this in their routine if they feel like they don't have any free time? I'd like to know more about that, because I'd never heard of it before.
Okay, so the theory is that dopamine is this neurotransmitter that is associated with motivation. So basically, it helps us feel more motivated. For example, we like food because it gives us dopamine. We like content, like podcasts or watching YouTube videos or movies, because it gives us dopamine. And the basic idea is that the more dopamine we get, the fewer receptors of dopamine in our brain we have. And as a result, because we have fewer receptors, we need more dopamine to get the same high. So the more pleasure we get, the more pleasure we need. It's like, with drugs.
Yes.
Yeah, the same thing. So basically, you can compare dopamine to a drug.
Well, I had read a study, and it spoke about how on social media addiction. I wanted to do a show on social media addiction, because I see so many people with that affliction. And one of the studies that I read said that every time someone heard a ding or a buzz or a bleep or something that let them know they had a message or an update or something, that it actually released dopamine and gave them that euphoric feeling. And that's why people are always reaching for their phone, or always, connecting through, through social media. And it's, in this particular case, dopamine fasting. What is dopamine fasting? What exactly is it? Okay.
So the point of dopamine fasting is removing as much dopamine as possible. For example, like I do it during one entire day, during 24 hours.
How do you do that? In today's world, it's fascinating to me. How do you remove all things that release dopamine, from television, radio, podcasting, cell phones, tablets, or whatever. Do you just disconnect from everything?
Okay, ideally, yes. You at least disconnect from everything at the very least. Ideally, go to do it like a retreat. Go hiking somewhere. That's ideal. For me, I do it on Saturday, and I cannot afford that. So because I still, have client sessions on Saturday. But otherwise, I don't get food. I don't get any content. What else?
So it's like physical fasting as well. So like you like dieting.
Look, it's a range. It depends on how disciplined you are. Ideally, yes, you want to remove food because food is one of the most powerful sources of dopamine.
Sure. Sure. So you disconnect food, you disconnect technology, and all of that. What about reading?
Like also, no reading. Whatever gives you pleasure, you need to disconnect from that on that day.
And what is the result that you can see from doing that? What is the positive result that you either are trying to achieve or that you do achieve by removing dopamine that way?
Yeah, the medical result is that the number of dopamine receptors in your brain increases, and as a result, you enjoy. You can feel pleasure from smaller things that did not feel pleasurable at all before that. Let's say, a good example for me is food. I don't like sugar anymore. So, for example, I like broccoli. And I think that I like broccoli today just as I used to like sugar 10 years ago, something like an ice cream.
So do you do this dopamine fasting every week, 1 day a week?
Yeah, right now this is my protocol.
Right, that's your routine. And so you don't have any sugar at all. How, I always hear about that especially in Americans' diets, is so much sugar in everything. And how do you tell me what it was like to give up sugar? What was the process, and what was the length of time before you sort of said, I can take it or leave it?
For me, it was 10 years, and it was a very, very slow process whereby I was taking a little bit of sugar, out of my diet. Well, let's say every month. Mm-hmm. Like this. It's just step by step.
Yeah. Step by step.
Baby steps.
How has it affected you? How has it affected your physiology? Has it affected your psychological profile in any way? I mean, what are the positive effects of cutting out sugar for you?
From the physiological standpoint, it's not easy to say because the time frame was so long, right? 10 years. It's hard to track.
Okay.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead. Finish, please.
From the psychological standpoint, I believe that I am more resilient because I get pleasure from simple things. I don't need an ice cream right now to feel great. I don't need to eat chocolate or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's easy. It's easier to enjoy life more.
Interesting. Do you miss it?
No way.
Oh, really? That's fascinating. That's fascinating to me. So, Roman, I read reports that divorce and breakup rates are through the roof due to COVID-19 and the quarantine and everything. Have you seen any uptick in your clients seeking to get some advice on how to cope with being stuck at home with their spouse or significant other?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And what is the most common? What's the most common theme through all of these clients that you've seen through COVID, if there is one?
The main theme is that whichever problems they have exacerbated. It just got worse.
Interesting. And And how do you help someone cope with something like quarantine when they're spending so much time with their partners? What are some tools that they could use to sort of cope through that? Because now it's going on 3-4 months.
Yes. The first tool is spending time apart strategically. So you really need that, because we miss each other after not seeing each other.
Sure.
And that's the point. That's a very good strategy in normal times, but in COVID, this is very important. So you need to design your days in a way that allows you to go away and spend at least a few hours away from your spouse or your partner.
Got it. That is so true. And I can tell you from firsthand experience as well. So what's your advice for couples that might be experiencing hard financial times or hard employment times during the quarantine? Money is like a big deal, but you add the stress of being, working from home, or you add the stress of not being able to separate. And if you add another layer, if they have, young children at home, how do you get off of that treadmill of stress to sort of and allow yourself the opportunity to recharge?
Look, there's no quick solution. I think one solution is really to get more disciplined and, for example, learn a new skill that you can actually go out in the market and sell for money. So be proactive. Don't wait for things to improve. For example, I have this client that I like so much. She's from Russia, and in June she had this opportunity to switch career, to transition into a completely new career as a teacher of this programming language, Java. And so she's been studying for that. She's getting training, and she will be ready to start her new career already in September. So wow. See, 3 months and she's already in a better position.
That's excellent. Listen, we all know that small achievable goals are the way to build new habits, right? Yes. But how should a couple how does a couple structure small communication or relationship goals so that they can be successful in following your protocols, like, comfort, variety, love, and significance? How do they, if let's say they don't have any of those tools and they come to you, how can they work together to build that?
Well, if they come to me, that's easy, because I will take them through the process of first setting their goals, both individually and as a couple.
Sure.
And the second component is that I'll actually take them through all these 6 needs, and I will show them how important these needs are for each of them, and how the other partner is actually meeting those needs, and how they can meet those needs better.
And how long does it typically take in one of these sessions before you notice that a habit is beginning to form, a new, productive, positive habit?
Like, if we're talking about progress, the progress can be already after the second session, I would say progress. But a habit forms in about 2 months. A real habit.
That doesn't seem like a time to make a fundamental change that'll provide you the tools to have an ongoing, more communicative and supportive relationship. Seems like a small investment to have a very positive result. So do you yourself have a particular morning routine or a work routine that has helped you prioritize the importance of how you structure your day and what you get done and how you interface with any relationships?
Yes. And I'm always experimenting with my routine. Now it looks like this. It basically starts the previous night when I plan my day. Then when I wake up, when I wake up, I exercise a little bit. I do stretching. I do a few push-ups. Then I breathe. And usually I do it like the Wim Hof method.
Mm-hmm.
Then I visualize my goals, one of my goals. Then I sit down at my computer and I review the list of things I'm grateful for, just, to create that positive outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Then I write down, I journal a little bit about my sleep. Then I remind myself of this thing called the triad, which is something that, sets me up for a good day. And it's a tool that I use to bring myself into the present moment.
What is that? Explain more about what the triad is, if you would.
Yeah, sure. The triad is this simple system that Tony Robbins created, and it consists of 3 things. And we use it to change our state immediately. So, for example, going from depression to excitement very quickly. And the first component is physiology. It's about how you are, let's say, about your posture, about your smile. So when you straighten your back and your shoulders are straight and you smile, you feel better automatically. The second component is meaning or language. And this is the meaning that you ascribe to events. So, for example, something bad happened and you might say to yourself, oh, something bad happened to me. But instead, you can look for a lesson in it. And instead of thinking about the pain in that experience, you think about the lesson. So you remember, you reframe the experience by thinking of it as a lesson. And the third component is focus. So what do you focus on right now? And for me, I do my best to focus on the present moment, on what I'm doing right now, what's around me,
Mm-hmm.
on the reality, on the actuality. Yeah, this is the tool.
That's amazing. I mean, that is I can see how that could have a positive impact on anybody's relationship. Now, how do you stay up? How do you stay up to date with the latest trends or research in your field? How do you stay up to date so that you're giving people the most up to date guidance, especially as it relates to their relationships?
One of the ways is that I follow the, how should I say this? I took a program by Tony Robbins,
Mm-hmm.
like to become a life coach, and they always release new material. So even though I completed the program, I use that material to keep myself up to date. They release it every week, and there's a lot of things to learn.
Absolutely, and that brings me up to my next question, which is really something I thought was a great thing based on what I've read and what I've seen on your YouTube channel. You've described yourself as a lifelong learner. Are there any fields of interest that you want to learn about but haven't had a chance to learn about yet?
Not really. I think I am at this point. I feel I'm in a very good place because I like to focus on one thing. So when I was a translator, I focused on that. I focused on becoming a better translator. Right now, I'm a coach, and I'm always on the lookout for things that can help my current clients and make me a better coach.
Describe to me what your viewpoint is of a lifelong learner, right? Everybody has an idea. We all know that, hey, we are always learning until the day we die. But what is it in specificity that you view a lifelong learner? Why would you classify yourself that? First of all, what do you do that makes you a lifelong learner? And how do you recommend that to others, and how do they get started? How do they become a lifelong learner?
I am a lifelong learner because growth is so important to me. Improvement is so important to me. When I make even a small shift toward better things, I'm so excited. And that's why, and how do you do it? You do it by learning and by actually practicing what you learned. So my specific advice is for people to look for this, to this earning to grow in yourself, find it, and then apply it. But the important thing is not just like consume information, but do something about it all the time, because practice beats, just consuming content. It's more.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's one thing that you're right. I want to just point out to make sure our audience knows that is one thing that you have said repeatedly in everything that I've read and in your video, that you like to teach actionable strategies for happier relationships. And so what you're saying, what I just heard you say, which may trigger that, is that you can't just say the words, you have to put them in action, right?
That's true. That's true. And that's one of the things that is so great about coaching, because with a coach, you have that external motivation, because a coach will give you an assignment and they will hold you accountable. So you have to do it. Whereas if you like read a book or watch a video, most like 99% of people, they will never do anything about it. They'll just say, wow, that looks great. I'd love to have that in my life. And they forget about it in 5 minutes.
What do you do, Roman, if you have a client and you give them tasks to complete or homework to complete and they don't do it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The first thing I do is when they come to the next session, I do the task right in the session. Right in the session. For example, it might be just like pretending. There's a strategy called pretending, and we can pretend that, for example, I told them to go out and get 3 dates, go out on 3 days that week, and they didn't. And then I'll just sit down with them during the next session and pretend that we're having those 3 days.
Interesting. And I find that fascinating. How does that make them feel? And what do you hope? What are you trying to accomplish by doing that? What is that teaching moment?
Okay. The main idea with goals is that they help you build momentum. Even if you start with smaller goals, which is basically the right approach, you build momentum. So you complete the first goal, even if it's a small one.
Sure.
And then you already have momentum. And that momentum propels you to the next one and the next goal and the next goal. And gradually your goals get bigger. So when the client comes to me and says that I did not do the homework, I basically, by pretending that they write in the session, I help them complete that first goal. You see? Mm-hmm. Even if we're pretending during the session, the very act of completing that goal, even not ideally, it already registers in their mind. They feel the sense of accomplishment. They feel good about themselves, and they already develop that momentum.
So that's really interesting. So if I understand correctly, what you do is you say you didn't complete the homework on your own. We're going to complete it now, and you're not going to get the 100% feeling of satisfaction like you would if you would have done it on your own, but you are going to get some satisfaction or sense of satisfaction that you completed the goal to begin momentum. Because momentum builds on those small accomplishments, whether you do them on your own or whether someone grabs you by the hand and helps you accomplish them. Either way, you're getting some momentum. And some momentum is better than no momentum.
Absolutely.
Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes. A very, very, very good summary.
All right. Excellent. So let's talk about you for a little bit, right? So what do you feel when you see someone for the first time and you know that they're, for lack of a better term, lost, and then through your coaching, you see them develop and evolve to the point where now they are moving in the right direction. And I use that term in a broad sense, but the right direction. What does that make you feel like? And how does that help you achieve your goals to keep you motivated? I can see how you can help others be motivated to get things done so they feel that momentum. How do you get momentum?
Yeah. Terrific question. See, when a person shows progress in the direction that they want, I feel so excited. You can't believe it. And the reason is, my main goal is contributing to other people. And by helping them make progress, that's what I'm doing. And for me, this is the best source of momentum for myself. Exactly.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? This is a reasonably new path for you, and you clearly have a passion for it, and you enjoy it. Where do you see yourself in 5 years doing what you're doing?
I wouldn't say that I don't think about it again, but the most important thing for me is to contribute and be helping other people. And if I usually evaluate my day by how much I contributed to at least one person. So if I helped at least one person, and even if it was like my father or my son, I already feel that this was a good day. So I'm not overstressing myself about this. So if in 5 years I'm at the same place financially, that would be fine. Definitely, I want to be a better coach. I want to be able to help more, but this all comes down to this main goal, contributing more. So I would say, I want to be able to contribute more.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the obvious question. Everybody has a bad day. What does a bad day look like for Roman? And how does Roman apply the techniques that he tells and tries to teach other people? How does he apply it to himself?
Frankly, there are not that many bad days for me because first of all, I think I use this triad technique that I told you about quite efficiently, because I can always reframe whatever happened to me, and I can always find the positive in it. And I'm able to focus on what's right now, what's in front of me, not on the past, not on regret or the future.
That would be a great tool to have for many people that I know in my own life. I want to talk about one thing. You mentioned you had a son, right?
Yes.
How do you apply these techniques to children? Like, let's say you're an adult talking to a younger child.
Well, the main idea when it comes to kids is to give them unconditional love, regardless of their age, especially, in fact, when they are teenagers, because this is a very difficult period for them. So you do want to give them lots of unconditional love. And why unconditional love? Because, as our kids grow older, they lose the unconditional love that we gave them in the very beginning when they were small. They had tons of unconditional love from us, but gradually it grows less and less and less until the love becomes 100% conditional. And this leads to all kinds of trauma and all kinds of neurosis.
Sure.
And whereas the opposite of this is unconditional love that inspires them, that helps them realize their potential, that helps them to see their potential. Because when you do this, you show that you believe in them 100%, and you support them. You actually communicate with them. So many people say that I can't communicate with my teenager, and that's the reason, because you come into each conversation with a teenager with the intention to criticize them. But how about unconditional love? How about actually listening to them and being empathetic and being compassionate?
Sure. That's good advice. And as somebody that has a grown daughter and now 2 grandkids, I wish I would have had that advice years ago. Roman, as we wrap up here, I want to ask, what's next for you? Do you have any new business endeavors, life goals? Are you going to run a triathlon? Tell our listeners what they can expect if they follow you. What are they going to see? And that actually leads into a question. So that's one part of the question. The second part of the question is, since you're a public figure, right? And people obviously will follow you on social media or on your website or what have you. How do you lead by example? Like how if somebody was just looking at your, not knowing you, but just looking at your website, trying to figure out if they want to engage you as a life coach, what would they see, and what would be something that they get from what they see? Like, oh, he's an athlete, or he's this, or he's that, or the other. I just was curious how you project yourself to other people to attract people.
Okay, yeah. So to answer your first question, I see myself becoming more authentic and relatable. I want to be more authentic. I want to show more of myself, my true self,
mm-hmm.
in whatever I do publicly. And the second thing, let me give you an example. One thing that I helped my clients with is masturbation addiction, porn and masturbation. So I put out my story on YouTube about how I had to face this addiction and how I combated it, and how I've been clean for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And by telling them the story, it turned out to be a pretty good example. And people
responded.
They responded. They relate to it, and they say that they thank me for being open about this.
I find, as somebody who's in media, that it's so often I see people and they try and portray themselves as, this or that or the other. And then when their true selves come out, or comes out that they're not as perfect as they try to portray themselves, that it is 10 times more devastating than if they just would have said, hey, I'm not perfect, or I'm not this, and I'm not going to judge anybody, or what have you. And, you can use politics as a prime example of that. And I was just curious, because what you said is so important. I think that people always root for an underdog. I think people always want people to overcome obstacles and be there to help them overcome those obstacles. And so I think having that kind of transparency, especially in your line of work, would be critical, because your line of work is 100% based on trust.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So,
if they don't have that, then, and if they don't have that with you, if you don't have between a life coach and a client trust, where they can talk to you about what's really going on, you can't help them, because you're just helping a facade of what they want you to see. They have to show you their real selves so that you can help them be better, help their real selves be better. And I respect the fact, and I applaud you for the fact that, being transparent on a public arena, and I know this firsthand, is not easy. It's not easy to do, because no matter, you'll get a lot of supporters, but you'll always get those people that sting. And here's the funny thing that I learned, Roman, is when there's negative, when you're vulnerable, you may get 10,000 comments that are absolutely positive and supportive, but that one comment is the one that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And it's so horrendous. And I've given speeches about this where I've over the years where I've said, it's funny, even when even with in relationships, out of 100 things, you could do 99 things perfectly, but if you do one thing wrong, that's the thing that the person remembers. And so to put it out there, it's brave. It is. It's brave to put out your vulnerability, because to show yourself as less than perfect is really the ultimate in trust.
Yes, I agree. And those comments, they can sting, but remember, you're not supposed to be liked by everyone, and that's actually impossible. And one of the main things that I remember when people reject me in any sort of way, I can just say to myself that it's just a thought in their head about me. Why should I bother about it? And it might not even be a result of me doing something wrong. It might be just a consequence of their bad mood that day. Maybe they did not have breakfast that day and they feel hungry.
Right. And I agree. I don't focus on the negative, but it doesn't really diminish the sting of it. But I try not to react to it, and I certainly try not to dwell on it. It is. And nowadays, people have access to you through so many different channels. But Roman, before we go, tell our audience how they can find you. What if you have a website, your social media? Tell them where they can find you, where they can learn about you, and then we will share that as well on our social media and our website.
Yes, my website is romanmironov.com, spelled as ROMANMIRONOV, and it has all the links to my social media. So click the links, and also you can hit the contact tab and contact me for a no-fee session with whichever problem you're facing right now. I'd be happy to sit down with you and have this free session. And if you tell me that you're coming off the DJ Doran Show, I'd be happy to give you a 30% discount of any coaching package.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's a great idea. Roman, I want to add this one other thing. How long is your first free session, so people know what to expect? And then also, I just completely forgot my second question. So start with the first one and see if the other one comes back in my mind.
Yeah. It's 1 hour long.
Okay, 1 hour long. And I was going to ask you, are your sessions now with COVID, are they virtual like what we're doing? Because I feel like we're having a conversation. It would be nicer if we were here in person, but this is so much better than a phone call.
It is, yeah. And right now they're 100% online.
Perfect. So I will tell everyone that's listening, check out Roman's website, go to his social media, take advantage of that hour session to get to know him and to see if he can bring value to your relationship. I know from all of my friends that about 75% of them should be calling you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
know.
The other thing too, Roman, that I find is people have these issues and they talk amongst their friends about these issues, but they don't know where to go, right? They don't know where to look, And so one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show and I was so excited for you to be on the show was because this could be a tool that we can share I'll share it with all my friends that are dating right now that are, oh my God, you should see what happens and you should see what this person did and this person did. And I think if they had a chat with you, that would be a big help to change their perspectives. As a matter of fact, I'm going to connect you with my friend Jenna Grish, who has that dating podcast. That should give you enough work for about 3 years.
Thank you.
But my pleasure. I will do that through email. I'll introduce you, and then go from there. And by the way, she could use your help personally, not only her but her clients. But Roman, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you'll come back on. And I'd like to follow up and see how you're progressing as time goes on.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, DJ.
You're welcome. Take care. Have a wonderful week and a good weekend.